Hey, what's going on everyone? So more progress in the film room. You can see I have the frame for what will be eventually a green screen. We'll be filming most of our like how-to and instructional, informative videos in here, and I think some of the more hands-on stuff we'll probably do on this desk. What you want to do is stand about 3 to 4 feet in front of the green screen itself so that you're not, pressed against it and creating a shadow, which will be really bad for when you're trying to use Ultra Key, Chroma Key, whatever, to change the color of the background. And if we're going to be using 4K, well, it's going to crop the image just a little bit, so yeah, you can see right inside the frame, and that's the point. So we're going to need the green screen itself, which is over here. All right, so this is what is known as muslin. This is kind of like a bed sheet of sorts, but it's pretty thick. It's actually really heavy too, and you want this to be not transparent at all, because when you do go into editing later on and you find that it is transparent, you have weird colors kind of washed out in the background, assuming that your wall is not just a uniform color, then you're going to have a really bad time in production. Now, rule number 1, I'm not going to practice what I preach because I don't have one with me. I just, I just moved into here and I still have a lot of stuff to buy. You want to iron this. You want this to be as flat as possible. You don't want any wrinkles because those will create micro shadows, and again, very hard to get out post filming. So this has just a little opening, a little sleeve that goes all the way through, and we're going to thread this part up top on the bar all the way across. We'll let it hang down. Now, to compensate for the lack of an iron, I'm gonna hope these clips reach. These are kind of short. They're not sticking out very far from the pole, and I think that the frame is 10 feet wide and the muslin is only 9 feet wide, but yeah, whatever. Worst case, I'll just take it down later and iron it. But I do want to set it up and see kind of what it looks like, start playing around with the Ultra Key effect in Adobe Premiere Pro, and get used to making things look super fancy. So without further ado, let's go ahead and set this thing up. Alright, so after some ironing, which I didn't bother filming because, who wants to watch someone iron something, I've got this thing pretty much the way I want it. Now, the lights aren't super powerful for this. I was hoping they'd be a bit brighter in here. They are not, which means that there's a slight shadow here in the middle, and you're probably wondering why the camera's so close. I actually have a macro little lens fitted to the front of, sorry about the autofocus, to the front of this camera, so I can stand, about like 1.5 feet away from the lens, and my whole body will be in the shot. Just because it's a wide angle lens of sorts. So if I stand kind of there about, I'd say 1.5 feet, maybe to 2 feet away from the lens, then there isn't a shadow generated behind me. There's a slight one, but we'll talk about that in a second in Ultra Key with Premiere. And the lights are far enough apart that the shadows really don't show up until I'm about 1 foot away from the muslin. So I think, it's kind of weird saying muslin. It sounds awfully close to Muslim, and then I feel really weird. I think that if I use the center light here, I'll turn that on and it should brighten up the foreground, and that's exactly what I'm looking for to keep me bright, because these lights are pretty far away from me. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and insert the SD card, and then I'm going to start filming from the other side so that you can watch the screen, kind of see what things look like. That way you have an idea of how bright things need to be in the background. So you can see right now, I'll just kind of zoom in on this screen. It's really awkward doing like a 2-camera thing here. So the background is decently lit. I'm not too bright right now because the lights aren't shining directly on me, so what I can do is turn on this front light and things will brighten up. Well, it's a little too bright. A little overexposed there. Things will brighten up in the foreground. I look super pasty on that screen, but I promise you I'm not overexposed in real life. And we'll go ahead and start filming. So what we'll do is we'll take this footage and we will throw it into Premiere, and you'll be able to see, I'll just capture my screen there, you'll be able to see exactly what I do to get rid of the green background behind me and instead replace it with like black or gray. Well, you probably don't want to use black because I'm wearing a black shirt too, so that would clash. So maybe we can do like a gray color or just completely, you know, go out there with like pink or something. But the whole point is, as long as it's evenly lit and it's not like too in focus, you kind of want to blur the background out, and you don't want a lot of shadows. You also don't want to move super fast. If I like wave my hand back and forth in Premiere, you'll be able to see just slight grains of green. That's because the Ultra Key tool can't keep up with those fast motions. So when you're standing in front of a green screen, it's really only good for talking and slow movements. Movements that are predictable. Really fast ones will pose a problem for the software. All right, now we're going to cop this SD card. Let's bring it back with us. Turn this light off because it's all battery powered right now. And we will plug in the SD card. All right, ECIM. This was my first test clip. All right, here's the second one. So I'm going to switch now to the screen capture. So you'll see that instead of this awkward camera facing the screen. All right, so we have our clip on the desktop. Doesn't matter where you put it, just keep things nice and orderly so you know exactly where to go if you want your resources at your fingertips. We're gonna open up Premiere Pro and I'm gonna show you exactly what to do to start working with your green screen. So I have a previous video clip here, or a previous project I wanna open up. Slide the clip into the timeline, and then we're gonna click Effects up top, and then we're gonna go to Video Effects and Keying, and then we're gonna left click on Ultra Key, slide it over to the clip. Okay, nothing's gonna happen at first because what we have to do is click this tool on the left side, Key Color, and we're gonna use that little drop dot tool. And we want to select an area in this clip window that is pretty green, pretty kind of standard throughout. You don't want a darker shade of green because then it'll start warping the lighter colors, and there seems to be a lighter distribution here than there is dark. Also, you can kind of see the shadow behind my head. That's not good, so we need to adjust our lights a bit to get rid of that, or I need to stand further away from the green screen. So let's select a pretty standard color here. This looks to be pretty good, and there you go, look, boom. So we have a black background now, but it's not perfect. You can see we have some light shades in here. If you have a muslin especially, you're gonna have these issues unless your lighting is just perfect, spot on, or unless you're standing really far away from the green screen. So what I suggest doing, come over here to the left, matte cleanup. We can soften things that'll kind of better distribute the shades of light, and then midpoint, we can jump that all the way up, and then contrast, which will help with the black background, boom. Now it's almost all completely gone. And we will watch the playback now to see if it is in fact good enough for production. And so what we'll do is we'll take this footage now, we'll throw it into Premiere, and I'll just capture the screen there so you can see exactly what I'm working with. Now, one thing I want to point out, like I said earlier, because my hands are moving pretty fast, when you'll see they're just hanging in front of the green screen, you might see a bit of a green shade around my fingers if they're moving very fast. That's because the Ultra Key tool is having problems with interpolating that green and changing it to black, especially when it's happening for a split second. So when you're standing in front of a green screen like this, be sure not to move super fast. You can see what I'm doing there with my hand. You just get the idea that there's something that's not black behind me, it's green, and that's the downfall of using a green screen technology like this. It's not perfect, just don't move super fast and you shouldn't have any major issues. Another thing I want to do is check hardware utilization. I want to see if this is using the graphics card at all. I'm not sure because I've never used this tool. So while we are in playback, let's check. So CPU utilization, a few cores are being used pretty heavily, I'd say around 30–40%. That's pretty standard though. I mean, there are a few extra percentage points here for using the Ultra Key effect, but not too bad. And on the graphics card side, we have utilization here of a whopping 2%. All right, now at this point, I should clarify what we're really doing with the Ultra Key tool is deleting the background. In essence, what we're doing is selecting the color that we want deleted, and Ultra Key is rendering that background basically like a blank image in a PNG file. So we don't have anything now behind me, or well, close to anything. I would say that these shadows are gonna be an issue, but what we can do instead of just having a black plain background is sliding in an image like this one here. Now look at there, your boy is semi-transparent with his shirt because we're a bit aggressive with the with the settings over here to the left. So what we can do instead, we can choose some presets. Aggressive is pretty good. It's not too bad anymore. It used to be pretty bad, but now it's not too bad. So you can see there, my shirt is good. Let's go ahead and play back and see how accurate things look. Oh yeah, looking great. And we're not seeing any green smudges or dots around my hair. That's usually where it becomes obvious. This is
pretty good. You can see when I move my hands, there's a slight green tint. That's just something you'll pick up in production. Again, a downfall of using kind of a low quality setup here, but this should be okay for most of what I do.
Well, there you have it. I will say pretty simple to set up. I've never worked with a green screen before, and the software is fairly forgiving. So even if you don't have a perfect like production setup, perfect green screen, if you're not painting a wall and it's super smooth and evenly lit across the entire canvas, you can still probably get away with some of those errors in Premiere Pro, especially with the Ultra Key tool, but Chroma Key in general is pretty good now. The software's come a long way and it is fairly forgiving. For those who are wondering, I have the products linked in the video description for this setup here. Spent about $100 on the green screen, the frame and all. It's a pretty good investment, I would say. The muslin is pretty thick. I wouldn't recommend going with a cheap one because they are transparent. That could pose a problem in production, and kind of working with it now I can see why, because if the light's not evenly distributed and then like you have like a I don't know, a semi-dark wall or paint, your walls aren't very smooth, or maybe you have something behind the wall, then you're going to have a pretty rough time in software like Premiere. If you like this video, be sure to give this one a thumbs up. I appreciate a thumbs down. For the opposite, click the subscribe button if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more content like this. Don't worry, it won't be all on the green screen. It's not going to be super fake. I'll only use it when necessary. This is Science Studio. Thanks for learning with us.